Okay, so if we could put up the slides and start recording. We are recording. Very good. So let's put up the slides. My name is Rich Morales. I am going to be your host and also one of your trainers today. Really appreciate you all joining us and for this important call. A lot going on in the world, and we are thankful that you're able to take a couple hours with us and join us today. While the slides come up, I just say that we have interpretation, and hopefully it's ready. You should be able to see a globe on the bottom where you can put up, join us for interpretation. We have interpretation in Spanish. We also have it in Haitian Creole. And I'll leave the slide up for a second so people can read it. But please press on the globe down below, and you will be able to join the interpretation. I also want to take a second and thank Red Letter Christians for helping to sponsor interpretation today. It's a really helpful partnership. We want to make sure that every call and every training that we do, that we have interpretation so that everyone can participate. All right, so again, my name is Rich Morales. Let's go to the next slide. And I don't see the commitments there, but we're going to go over some commitments. There they go. We want to make sure that we start every undivided training with commitments that we all agree to. And you will always see these in the beginning of our trainings. Before we get started, we want to make sure that we all commit to the flow of racial healing and justice, that we commit to warmth, respect, and empathy. We commit to dream in the dark. And if we can all put it in the chat that we commit to these, I would really appreciate it. Again, we commit to the flow of racial healing and justice. We commit to warmth, respect, empathy. We commit to dream in the dark. Excellent. Thank you so much for committing to this. All right. So the agenda today, we're going to have a faith grounding from Jasmine Sosa. We're then going to have a political update from myself, and we're going to speak a lot about sensitive locations and accompaniment. Then we're going to have a group of panelists that are already applying accompaniment and faithful witness. And I'm looking forward to hearing from them. And then we're going to hear from Stephanie, and Stephanie's going to walk us through the power of teams and the undivided way. Then I'm going to call to action and steps that you can take immediately besides creating teams that you can take. So that's the agenda today. Yes, we're going to send all this out afterwards. You're going to get the slides. We also have materials that we're going to talk about that we're going to send out. So all of this is going to be available for you after the call. All right, next slide. I believe it's our grounding with Jasmine. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Rich. Hola, everyone, and welcome to this space. I am born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm the daughter of immigrants. My father is Cuban. He swam for 3 days to Guantanamo Bay and had quite the process of naturalization, but because of who the president was at the time and the laws that there were, once he was able to step foot on American soil, he was able to seek asylum. However, my mother, she's Mexican. She had a student visa and came at the age of 14. And she would go on to face what would be years and years of a much harder process due to the ways in which the laws that she followed would mix with her story, with her life. She anticipated only staying for a couple of years to finish her education in the United States, but actually due to faithful followers of Jesus who were generous with their time, with their finances, and with their prayer, my mom became a citizen Valentine's Day of 2020. But most of my childhood was kind of feeling frustrated with policies and practices and laws that were created before I was born that dictated my mother's value and worth and her ability to be in my life in Atlanta versus my father's. Much of my life as well, growing up in the suburbs of Atlanta, I would start or preface with the fact that I was Cuban, and then sometimes wouldn't even say that I was Mexican for fear, for ways in which people spoke about Mexicans in my communities, or when I did, I was often told, but you're one of the good Mexicans, or you're maybe one of the well-spoken Mexicans. So I had a very turbulent experience as the daughter of immigrants growing up, but one that I look back on and am so grateful for. And because of people who loved Jesus, who surrounded me with comfort and care, because of organizations like Undivided, I was able to find so much peace within the communities of followers of Jesus who faithfully practiced the way of Jesus, and allowed for me to experience hope. That being said, I currently work for the Undivided organization and work in our gathering experience. We have a once a month virtual call that meets on the second Sunday of every month. And it's basically a community of folks who are committed to following Jesus and practicing justice. So if you're interested in that, there will be some resources that are sent over, because we all need some more folks who are dedicated to loving themselves, loving their neighbors, and loving enemy in ways that practice the ways of God. So that being said, hopefully, as I lead us in a time of grounding and prayer before we begin, you'll know that this isn't, I guess I'd rather say sometimes hope, prayer, and maybe the joy of others can feel triggering. I know for myself, as I've engaged online, if someone has said to, just slap a Bible verse on something, it's almost felt dismissive, or maybe it's felt like you can't even engage with it. I know for myself, a couple of times I have to just get off of my phone to not feel dismissed of the very real, honest, raw feelings and experiences that being a brown woman in the South often creates. So that being said, I wanted to start with a little bit of my background, but move us into some prayer and some breath work. Why prayer though? Because prayer, even in and of itself, we've all been around spaces that have said, I'm offering my thoughts and my prayers to you. And sometimes that feels dismissive. Sometimes it can feel as if it's almost a cop-out instead of actually practicing the ways of Jesus or being engaged in those spaces. It can feel, just dismissive. Dismissive might be the best way for it. But we want to offer up a third way of experiencing and embodying who Jesus is through the Undivided way, and that is incorporating the very breath of God, the very words of God into our practices. Because like Tony said in the chat, prayer can change things. And it's through the combination of faith and prayer with action and the ways in which we embody who God is, that we can ultimately see restorative healing change. That being said, why breath prayer for this moment? In times of stress, your sympathetic nervous system can be on high alert. And that portion of your nervous system is otherwise more commonly known as your fight or your flight. And so I don't know about you guys, but for the last couple of months and maybe even years before that, sometimes we can feel like we are on a perpetual fight or flight experience, where we're just constantly getting our to-do lists done. You're trying to exist as a mother, father, brother, sister, kindly, and it also engage in your 9-to-5 job. However, sometimes just staying afloat is all we can manage. And I want to offer a way of practicing prayer through breath prayer that can maybe get us out of that fight or flight space. So we're going to get to participate in box breathing through scripture. And ideally, the box breathing is going to help you move out of that state of fight or flight that you might be in if you're coming onto this call. Or maybe you're coming off of some really great rest. And this will just help you stay in there so we can stay focused and really absorb what the panelists have to say today. So as we embark into this journey together for the next hour or so, I would love to focus us in on a verse in Acts 1:8. And we're going to do this, and I'll explain the boxed prayer portion as we go. But let me read this here for you first. So Acts 1:8 in the ESV translation, it says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." So our box prayer that we're going to go through, and you can go ahead and put that up, is going to take that Acts 1:8 verse and combine it with John 5:19 that says, "Truly, truly, I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does." So again, in that embodiment of practicing Jesus's way, together, I would like to invite you to practice this prayer, and you can use different verses that speak to you, and practice this form of breathing incorporated together. When you are embodying boxed breathing or boxed prayer, it can help you improve your concentration by recentering you. It improves your focus. It can reduce your stress, and is clinically shown to lower blood pressure as well. So this won't hurt us. It can only do good for us. So what I'd like for you to do right now, if you are able, sit or stand wherever you find yourself with a straight back. Release any tension you might be holding in your jaw, or relax your shoulders. Close your eyes as you're able, and let's inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4, and then hold for 4 as we breathe in and breathe out these phrases. So I'm going to model this first one for you, and then we'll get to do it completely together. So we would breathe in, "I will only do," for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds. Exhale and breathe out, "What I see my Father do." And then we will hold for 4 seconds. And we'll do that throughout the rest of the prayer of, "I will only say what I see my Father say. I will share who Jesus is. And I will love neighbor and enemy as myself." So practice this with me to ground us together before we begin. So breathe in for 4. "I will only do." Hold for 4. Now exhale for 4. "What I see my Father do." Hold for 4. Inhale, "I will only say." Hold for 4. "What I see my Father say." Now exhale for 4. Inhale for 4. "I will share." Hold for 4. "Who Jesus is." Now exhale. Hold for 4. Now inhale, "I will love." This might be the toughest one. Hold for 4. Exhale, "Neighbor and enemy as myself." Now hold for 4. There's a ton of other places you could be on a Friday at 1 p.m., but you've chosen to be here, and that is both a sacrifice and a gift and a joy. Life has a mix of lots of different emotions. So I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being present, whether it's in a recording afterwards or here right now. I also want to say thank you for the ways in which you are embodying the ways of Jesus. In your communities, in your neighborhoods, in your families. You are committing to a sacrificial third way each and every day. And so I hope with this boxed breath prayer that it can be another tool in your toolbox that would allow for you to experience the wholeness of your body in your real unpolished life in such a way that can fuel the work that you'll continue to get to do out of the resources from our panelists and the wisdom of the Undivided crew here today. Thanks so much for participating, and Rich, take it away.
Thank you, Jasmine. That was very beautiful. Thank you for grounding us. Again, welcome, and really appreciate you all for joining us today. We have a large group, and we had to do a webinar because it was such a large group. But as I'm speaking, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. We will try to have a question and answer, but if you can get them in advance, we're going to track them, and then we will then try to get to your questions. So if we can put up the slides, when I was prepping yesterday, I realized that I'm getting on this call, and most people probably don't know who I am, and I thought it was important to tell my story and why I'm here today and my why. And so again, my name is Rich Morales. I am born and raised in Philadelphia. I'm a proud Puerto Rican. And if you don't know, I love the Eagles, and really happy they're headed to the Super Bowl. But I'm an attorney. I practiced for several years representing people, mostly on immigration matters, both in New Jersey and in the Washington, D.C. area. And then in 2012, I became an organizer. And in 2013, I began to do faith-based organizing. I was hired in 2013 by Faith in Action, which was back then called PICO National Network, to do organizing to stop the deportation of our members. You probably remember, but in 2013, there was a fight for immigration reform, but a lot of people were being deported. And so it was my job was to help our members in PICO to tell their own stories, to defend themselves from deportation. And that year was pretty successful. We stopped 40 deportations, and I really that year fell in love with organizing. So I'm here. Yes, I'm an attorney. I'm a trained attorney. I have my license that I pay for every year to keep, but I consider myself an organizer first. And I really, really love organizing because I think that's the way we're going to win. That's the way we're going to create change. And it's the way we're going to create power for all of us and our families. I eventually had many different roles in Faith in Action, eventually become political director, which was my last role until last year. And then I was hired by Undivided and joined this incredible team at Undivided, now as chief of staff. And super excited where we're all headed. I am really happy to join this family, and I'll join you all in this journey and building, with you all into the future. A lot of times I'm asked why I do this work. I have, I've been working in immigration. I've been helping to stop deportations, doing policy work in Washington, D.C., working on many different campaigns. And I've come to the conclusion that I really don't have a choice, that I'm morally obligated, and I made a promise to act as a messenger of truth and really expose injustice. And I believe that I have a moral obligation to walk with the most vulnerable. And I say walk on purpose because it's not leading, it's walking with for me. And as an organizer, it's creating the spaces for people to tell their own stories, to defend themselves, to advocate for themselves as they desire, as the way that they see best. If you could in the chat, I would love to hear from you in just one or two words. What choices or promises have you made? And maybe it's the why you're here today. God's calling, I've promised to. Great, thank you. Micah 6:8, thank you. Do justice and love mercy, to learn, looking for direction, to stand with the most vulnerable, but not be silent. Thank you, Carla. Empower, educate myself. Thank you for sharing why you're here today, the choices you made, maybe the promises you made. All right, if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to use some terminology today, and which I think it's important that you all understand some of the terminology that I'm going to use. And because I move quickly and sometimes I use terms that people don't understand. So, so sensitive locations, you're going to hear that today. And sensitive locations tend to be places of worship, schools, and hospitals. And I'm going to talk about the policy on sensitive locations in a little bit. But if I mention sensitive locations, I'm mostly talking about places of worship. And I might mention schools and hospitals, but mostly about places of worship. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, I'm going to use ICE a lot. We should all know what that means, but they're in charge of immigration enforcement. But I'll be using ICE. ICE checking is something I'm going to be using a lot as well. And it's where a person goes into a meeting with an ICE agent who will ensure that person complies with the terms of release. Many in ICE check-ins have final orders of deportation. And we're going to talk about more what that means. But basically, the way that when I teach about this, an ICE check-in is like, think of a probation officer, a parole officer, and where persons that have contact with the immigration system might be seeing an officer to make sure that they're complying with the law. AYR is Know Your Rights. And refuge, it's a condition of being safe or sheltered from pursuit, danger, or trouble. We in Undivided use refuge. We don't use sanctuary. You might see that term in my slide someplace, but we like to use refuge instead of sanctuary. All right, so that's some of the terminologies that we're going to use, some of the terms to look out for. Next slide. And thank you for continuing to share your why. So we wanted to give you some background and context, where we are. I imagine if you're here, you know a lot about what's going on. But it's important to understand that we are going to be facing, likely mass deportations, but it's going to be a process. And there are people that are more vulnerable than others. So what we've been hearing, and you've probably heard for many, many, many months, is that there's a plan to maybe deport 1 million people per year. And that's the goal. However, it's important to realize that that's going to take time. It's going to take months. It might take a couple of years to get to that level. There is the need for funding. There is the need for more bed space. So to get to that level, and to get to the level of detention, to get to 1 million people per year, it's going to take time. You may have heard that the government's thinking about using Guantanamo Bay to hold people that are facing deportations. They're now increasing flights using military flights. And so all of that, it's part of that process to ramp up to get to 1 million deportations per year. The other thing that might slow down getting to 1 million deportations per year, it's going to be litigation and resistance from state and local governments. So think about sanctuary cities, think about the ACLU and other immigrant rights organizations. They already started their litigation. We already know that some cities and local governments are not going to support mass deportations or not going to support detention. It doesn't mean it's not going to stop ICE, right? We know that ICE is in New York City right now, detaining people. They're in Chicago right now, detaining people. So, but there will be resistance. So I like to talk about the next 6 months and really like what are we facing within the next 6 months. So we already saw this, but we have executive orders. We're likely to see more executive orders from the administration prioritizing deportation. We saw the one on sensitive locations. We saw several over the last few days, and we'll talk about sensitive locations in a second. What I expect and what we're already seeing is that they're going to target, most likely target people in the next 6 months with prior orders of deportations. So there's thousands and thousands of people in the United States that their priority level was lowered for deportation, and there was a concentration under previous administrations on people with criminal convictions, might be danger to the community. But now, as we've heard on Thursday of last week, all immigrants now are a priority for deportations, especially people that have prior orders of deportations, meaning an order from a judge. So those are the people that are being picked up right now that ICE is seeking in major cities and looking to deport these individuals. The other is targeting people that are under parole programs or are going to ICE check-ins, which I talked about. These are also people that have most likely have prior order deportations, but for various reasons. Maybe there's turmoil in their home country. Maybe there was a natural disaster in the home country and they couldn't be deported. These persons are not going to be priority. We're also likely to see over the next 6 months more expedited removals, meaning expedited deportations, and we're likely to see expedited court hearings, maybe an increase in immigration judges, maybe sent to the border, which has happened in the Biden administration, but will continue to ramp up deportations. And then we're going to see raids that can, to send a message to quote unquote sanctuary cities. And we've seen this already, like I mentioned, in New York and Chicago and Washington, D.C., in major cities. We're seeing ICE move in, looking for people with prior orders of deportation, and then trying to remove them from the country as quickly as possible. In this case, right now, is through military flights. And also, we haven't seen this yet, but there's going to be an increase in workplace raids, and the most vulnerable are day laborers. In the Northeast, for example, there's a lot of day laborers, and they congregate in certain locations. They're going to be very vulnerable as well to be targeted by ICE. Okay, and we're we are tracking questions in the chat, and hopefully somebody's writing them down for us then to answer in a little bit. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about the sensitive locations, and because it really, sensitive locations has a lot to do with places of worship, and as a faith-based organization, we want to make sure that it's understood the impact of the sensitive locations. So there was more than a decade ago, there was a memo that was sent by the Director of Homeland Security that applied to ICE that said that discouraged ICE enforcement. That means detention and targeting of immigrants in sensitive locations such as hospitals, schools, and places of worship. Now, it didn't mean that they could not. Like if there was an urgent reason, there was a dangerous person, a danger to the community, there was a list of things that gave exceptions. But for the most part, ICE was ordered through this directive not to detain people in sensitive locations. However, in my experience, I did see it many times, and even though that memo was, a part of the institution of ICE. So that memo was rescinded 2 weeks ago under the new administration. So we no longer have sensitive location policy. So what does that mean? What it means is that we, in our congregations, in our places of worship, we still have the same rights. Those rights were not taken away. That the same rights under the Constitution, those have not changed. ICE and law enforcement, just like in your home, just like in your workplace, and in many cases, even in your vehicle, you have constitutional rights, and those have not been taken away, and they must use a warrant if they want to conduct an arrest, especially in private areas. So again, let's be very clear that that has not been taken away. Now, has the danger increased because sensitive location policy has been taken away? Yes. But the constitutional rights have not been taken away. One thing that I think is really important as we do this work, especially for people that want to do refuge, is that we must understand what harboring and the consequences and the legality of harboring. As you can see on the right side, we have put together a guide for folks to on the sensitive location policy on the rights of places of worship. And I go through in that guide on harboring and what it means. It should not stop us from caring for undocumented people. It should not stop us from offering, help to a homeless, feeding the most vulnerable. It should not stop any of that. And let's talk about that in the guide. Lastly, because we now don't have the sensitive location memo, I think it's really important that we're all prepared. All 320 of us, if you have not gone through a Know Your Rights training, or if you haven't gone through one in several years, you should be going through a Know Your Rights training. All of us should be. Second, if you are clergy, if you are a church staff, you work in a place of worship, you definitely should be going through a Know Your Rights training and prepare your staff, prepare yourself in case there's an ICE raid. And lastly, we recommend that all congregations speak with an attorney and keep them on speed dial, especially if you're working with people that are undocumented, if you are going to offer refuge, if you're going to do accompaniment or do these other things that we're going to talk about today. Again, prepare is the best thing you can do, and Know Your Rights is one of the strongest things you can do in this moment. Okay. Next slide, please. So something that you're going to see in my presentation, you're going to see pictures of people that I have worked with, organizers I've worked with in the Faith in Action Network when I was there. And these are people that through these different tactics I'm going to talk about, their deportation was stopped. They were supported in some kind of way by organizers and the powerful work that I'm going to talk about today. So here you see Prince. His deportation was stopped through rapid response. Prince was actually put on a flight in the Washington, D.C. area, and there was a rapid response network in the Washington, D.C. area that went to Dulles Airport and stopped his deportation. Someday I'll tell you his story, but it's really awesome. He's a tattoo artist. He's really great. And this is, I believe, now his wife. So I'm going to talk about 4 tactics today as a faithful witness. Number 1 is accompaniment. And we believe that that's the first start for most people in our congregations, and we'll talk more about that. Number 2 is rapid response. I'm going to talk about that quickly today, and I'll touch on it. And then there's refuge and then deportation defense. We're not going to talk about specific deportation defense and refuge. Maybe in the future, like if there's demand for it, if there's an ask for it, maybe we'll do that. And there's a lot of big organizations that are offering both of those as well. But that's another tactic as a faithful witness. What's important about these tactics for us is that these are public actions where you're standing with the most vulnerable. Again, I want to repeat that. It's a public action where you're standing with the most vulnerable. Accompaniment and rapid response are ways for you to do that. So what we've been hearing a lot over the last 6 months is like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, we're asking you to act as a faithful witness. We're asking you to take a public stance and take a public action. And we believe that accompaniment and rapid response are the ways to do that. Next slide. So let's again review. Who are we talking about here? You're more likely in this work with accompaniment and rapid response going to be walking with people that might be detained already by ICE or in their custody. You might be working with people that are going to ICE check-in. Remember what I said, is that's probation, it's like a probation parole type of checking. Or they might even be going to immigration court. So they're facing deportation, haven't been ordered yet, but they're going to immigration court and seeing a judge. I had conducted a training a month ago in Ohio, and I asked the room about 40 people, how many people have been to immigration court, and no one ever was in an immigration court in that room. And it's something that I think we should all see and experience and share. It's heartbreaking. It's a hard thing for me to see, even after all these years I haven't done this. And I think it's something that we all should experience, but then share with others about what's happening in our immigration system, and it's not good. And then lastly, the people you might be working with are actively sought by ICE. And these are people that, we're seeing right now are targeted by ICE through raids. They're going to their houses and knocking on doors, or they may be going to their place of work, or they're a day laborer. So those are persons actively sought by ICE, and you're likely to encounter those individuals that need accompaniment or have asked for accompaniment or are in need of a rapid response. Okay, next slide. Oh, before you go to the next slide, we can go back. This is Rosa. And Rosa, she is an incredible leader now and organizer with Congregation Action Network in Washington, D.C. And she was offered refuge several years ago. This is when a ceremony welcoming her into refuge in Bethesda. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about accompaniment. And accompaniment is like, it is what it means, right? We accompany someone. But basically, it's about joining a family. And what we're asking is, like, as people say, that you're doing this through your congregation, and we're going to talk about teams. If you're doing this through your congregation or a partner congregation, maybe it's a vulnerable congregation with a lot of undocumented persons, and you accompany those persons to a ICE check-in or immigration court. And why would we do this? Well, like I said, there are experiences that we have not had, and we don't know a lot about what's happening in immigration, whether it's check-ins or core or deportations. And we want to witness and share. We want to act as faithful witnesses. And it's an opportunity to offer comfort. It's an opportunity to report back to your congregation about maybe a member that was detained or being detained. It's a way to lift up stories, like I said. It's a way to create encounters for non-immigrant persons in the congregation. And lastly, it's a way to hold ICE accountable. And what I mean by that is, like, we're going to see things moving very quickly in terms of detention, in terms of deportation, family separation, U.S. citizen children being left behind, persons that have been in the United States for 20, 30 years deported. I believe, as a faithful witness, this is something we need to expose, and that we need to hold these agencies accountable for this. Next slide. So how do we do accompaniment? So we do accompaniment is by committing to a team. And what we don't want is people doing this work and burning out, or doing this in isolation from your congregation. And so we prefer that you create a team that's committed and is happening through your congregation, and with defined roles. And Stephanie's going to talk more about this, but diverse teams, especially with persons that are impacted. And we also would like to see, and we recommend, that you're committed to acting as a faithful witness, and that means public action. Also, that you're committed to creating encounters with church members, persons that might you normally have no direct contact with persons that are directly impacted, but you're creating these opportunities for people to step in and encounter and build relationships with undocumented families, immigrant families, whatever it is that you define, but you're creating encounters for individuals in your congregation. And then lastly is committed to strategically connecting accompaniment to the larger issue of immigration reform and abusive tactics of ICE. The more you do this, the more abusive tactics you're going to see. You're going to see things that need to be exposed and talked about. And also, as we know, the system needs to change. And this is a great opportunity for you to tie the stories that you're learning and tie that to the need for legislation. It's an excellent way to tie both together. Next slide. So this is Catalino Guerrero. I talk about him a lot. He was in our first deportation case back in 2013, and he was under the Obama administration, they tried to deport him 3 times, and under the Trump administration, the last time they tried to deport him 3 times, but it was through accompaniment. And here you can see Senator Menendez. You can see here the bishop of the Catholic bishop of Newark, New Jersey, accompanying Catalino to his ICE check-in, and he was not deported. So so I talked about connecting accompaniment into immigration reform. Well, we believe that once you start learning these stories, that we need to share them, especially together with people that are undocumented. And we believe you can galvanize elected officials to publicly take action. As you can see in this picture here, we have Senator Menendez, the Senator of New Jersey, come out and support Catalino. You can bring public light and scrutiny to government immigration enforcement. We believe you can hold agencies accountable when they're using abusive tactics. And again, lifting up stories of enforcement near sensitive locations, we believe you're going to find, and also raids and illegal racial profiling. So you're going to see that, you're going to see a lot of things. We believe that the opportunity is for you to connect it to these other issues. So there's some questions in the chat. I'm going to look at them to see if I can answer them now. I see here a question: should we send attorneys? Should we send a training with our asylum seekers to the next the immigration court hearing? Yeah, I think it's really important that one thing that we can offer is helping connect people that are going to immigration court, ICE check-ins, is help them connect with attorneys. Sometimes people can't afford attorneys, and also doing maybe a fundraising drive so that they can hire an attorney could be another action that you take. Again, you do all this with the permission of the family, but that could be, I definitely recommend always connecting with an attorney. What are the specific rights of a congregation? I can't go into them all, but the constitutional rights have not changed. And there's a guide that we put together that show that we go through some of the specific rights. Is there a Know Your Rights training that's specifically geared to houses of worship? We can try to find that. And if there's a lot of demand for that, maybe we can bring in some attorneys that we all know and trust into a training for us. Are these cases after the inauguration, executive orders, or before? All the examples I'm telling you about today are examples of people during the last Trump administration. Okay, so those are some of the questions in the chat, and we'll continue to monitor that. And thank you, whoever is putting that in the chat. I really appreciate it. Next slide, please. So I'm going to quickly talk about rapid response and how to think about it. And we can do a longer training in the future, or I can come in and talk more with you about it. But again, the term is I think it's very intuitive, right? It's like we're rapidly responding to one of our communities that might be facing ICE raids or targeted by ICE. And again, we're going to talk about teams. Stephanie's going to talk about teams, but we prefer that you do this in teams of clergy and leaders. When I say leaders, these are members in your congregations, but also people that are directly impacted. And what are we going to do in a rapid response? We're going to respond to an ICE raid or enforcement that's happening. We're going to witness and record, and we're going to share. It could be social media, it could be other ways, but we're going to share what we have witnessed. And we're going to document, if there's any kind of abuse, if there's anything happening, separation of a family, we're going to make sure we document that. And again, share with the congregation, share with the world what's happening. And how do we do this? We recommend creating hotlines or text chains where the most vulnerable folks in your community can contact you so that you can do a rapid response. So in the last round of this, what we did was set up 1-800 numbers. We had also a specific number that people could call. We would, in the Washington, D.C. area, when I lived in the Washington, D.C. area, we actually had dispatchers, people that would just wait for a call on that number, and then they would then send a text to clergy and the team, and then we would head out and respond to an ICE raid. And we responded, it was about 6 or 7 different raids in the Washington, D.C. area that we responded to in about a 3-year period. And then we ask that you have the same commitments to act as a faithful witness, that you, anything that you do with your rapid response, that it's what the purpose is for you to share and to share what you saw, but also take public action. All right. You put in your questions. This is great. And we're running right on time. Next slide. Okay, so let's see what other questions you have. And all right, so I see here, Sue. Yes, so Sue is asking, if you're not a current member of a church congregation in TC area, I don't know what TC is, can you still participate in these efforts to aid immigrants? Absolutely. I have never found anybody that was not welcome to help. If anybody knows where the TC area is, or Sue, if you can put in the chat where the TC area is, and then we can help connect you. And then Stephanie tried to answer that. Okay. What other questions? Okay, here we go. Linda, how are sanctuary cities determined? They're determined by the local officials, and usually through a lot of advocacy from congregations, from other organizations. But it's local policy. Sometimes it's symbolic, but sometimes there's actual policy from local governments, like cities, that say we're not going to cooperate with ICE. Okay, there's a question about divisions that I think is too complicated. Do you recommend recording ICE interactions by audio and or video? We always recommend video. We all now have smartphones for the most part. And we recommend that you record and we believe that that's the best way for you to share it. All right. All right. And then let me take one more. So one question to clarify that I can do right now is a question about like, can ICE go inside a church today? The answer is yes. So ICE can go into a public area in your church and just like anybody else can. And they don't need a warrant for that. However, ICE does need a warrant to go into private areas. And what I recommend in the guide is that there's clearly marked areas that are private. And we talk about this in the guide. Also, ICE can't just walk in, let's say there's a public area on Sunday between 9 and 12 o'clock and it's open to the public, right? We go into worship and that's open to the public. But then it's closed from noon until the following Sunday. ICE is going to need a warrant to come into the sanctuary, into the church, into the place of worship. Okay, but we talk more about that in the guide. If there's a lot of interest, and let us know, then maybe we can do a Know Your Rights just for congregations in the near future. All right, I'm going to move forward. I'm excited. We have today a panel. We have a panel of people that began an accompaniment based on one of our trainings a few weeks ago, decided to do an accompaniment. And they're going to share today their experience, how they got into a team, some of the learnings from creating the team. So I'm hoping you take notes, but this is a real inspiring story here. And it's happening right now, that's what they're doing. So I want to welcome to the call, and if we can highlight them, I want to invite Walter Vasquez, Victor Martinez, and Raiza Rentas to the call. And if we can spotlight them and take down the slide. All right. So welcome guys to the call. And if we can just start off with some introductions. And I'm going to pull up my notes. Give me 1 second. I apologize. All right. All right. So, yeah, can you please introduce yourself to the audience? Please give your name, the city and organization and/or congregation that you are associated with. And if you feel comfortable, your immigration status.
I can get started. My name is Raiza Rentas. I am from Cincinnati, Ohio, but originally from Puerto Rico. I work with Hola Immigrant Welcome Center, which is a Christian nonprofit that serves people here in Price Hill in Cincinnati. And I am part also of Crossroads. That's where my congregation is. And you'll hear from Victor, who's also part of that congregation and a pastor. My immigration status is I'm a U.S. citizen. I'll pass it on to Walter.
Thanks, Raisa. Hi, everyone. My name is Walter Vasquez. I am in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was born and raised in Guatemala. I immigrated to the United States in 2007. I have the privilege of also working alongside Raisa here in our city of Cincinnati, have been involved with advocating and working for our immigrant community for now 15 years. I usually change my numbers. Since I got here 17 years ago, I got here to Cincinnati. I work with Block Ministries, that's the nonprofit organization here in Cincinnati, but also leading the Hispanic outreach efforts and working with Hola Immigrant Welcome Center. Happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Victor Martinez. I am based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I am originally from Puerto Rico, and I was born and raised there, and I moved to Cincinnati for work. And now I get to lead our Spanish-speaking community within Crossroads Church, and we get to support many families through the spiritual journey, but now also get to support them in other aspects of their life as well.
So starting with with Riza, and then Victor, and then Walter. Can you tell me what called you to join or create the accompaniment team that we're going to talk more about and get into specifics, but what called you to do that?
When we saw you in Columbus and you were sharing a similar presentation to what you're doing today, it was very inspiring. We were already walking with a family through their legal appointments. Pretty much, we helped them since they came to Cincinnati to settle. We have been walking alongside them through everything in life, and one of those things were appointments to their eyes showings where they had to just present themselves. And one was coming up almost immediately after that presentation that you did. So when we heard that this is something that we could do to support one of the families that we serve, we thought it would be amazing if we could support them through doing it.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So, like Raisa shared, I share this as well. I get to lead a community of Spanish speakers within Crossroads. And there's a particular family which you'll get to hear more of their story earlier, but we knew that they had an appointment coming up, and we wanted to, they were like many people that were afraid of what could happen, and we just wanted to make sure that they felt loved and supported. And when we heard about accompaniment, which was a new term for me, and really how does it look like to be there for people that we care for, people that we love, we decided that we were going to do that for them. Yeah.
Walter?
Same way, with Raisa, we work in seeing the needs that we have in our community, because the level of involvement that we have through our resources and services, we are always working with kids that we know their parents have a case because recently came. So seeing this opportunity made sense. So it's a nice and beautiful experience.
Thank you. And so let's go into more specifics. And so I'm wondering, and let's go to you, Victor. Let's tell me more about the family you accompanied. Are they connected to you?
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting story. A group of leaders from our church, we've been wanting to figure out how to best love our neighbors and really support our community. And so we traveled to the border to Texas, and we were there with an organization, and we were just going around understanding more about the situation and meeting people. And we got to meet this family at a gas station. We're just chatting, asking them about their experience. This family had just crossed through the border. They went through the procedure that people go through when they cross the border, and they were in a very difficult situation. Their kid was sick. They at this point they've been journeying for more than 6 months, so they're pretty exhausted and just not the place that you want to see anybody. And we just got to talk, but after we left that, because we were just visiting, doing different things, got put in the heart of a few of our leaders that they wanted to go back to bring medicine and bring some food to this particular kid who was sick. And so they did. And we told them that if they ever found themselves in Cincinnati, that they were going to have a community of people that would love them, that would guide them through their journey. And it's been very beautiful. They ended up in Cincinnati, and we stay true to our word of just walking with them. And so we've seen them slowly integrate into society. They're members of our community. Because of transportation, they're not always able to join us. But just recently they presented their kid in church, and we were there for that as well. So now we've gotten to celebrate birthdays and do things together. So they're very connected.
And so they're connected, and are they part of your congregation?
Yes, they are.
And so you did an accompaniment, and is it because they were going to a nice check-in?
They were going to an ice check-in, yes. So we did accompaniment for that.
And And when was it?
We went this week. We went with them this week.
And so Walter, can you tell us a little bit more about the purpose of the check-in?
Yeah, so it was a regular check. They usually this is something that immigration has just to make sure that those who have a case are actually following with whatever they sign when they enter the country. So it's a just normal check where the whole family went.
So the whole family was there. Can you can you describe the family? Like how many people are in the family?
Oh yeah. So the family is made of 4 because there's a newborn. Victor already mentioned. So there are a mom, dad, and a 2-year-old now or 1-year-old. I'm bad with numbers, but yeah, it's a small family of 4.
And so I wanted to, as you guys saw, like I emphasized teams. I emphasized the importance of teams, especially in congregations. And so I know you have a team. Maybe, Riza, you can tell us like how many people are in your team, and maybe like tell us, some of the obstacles that you guys faced, maybe some of the learnings, in terms of building a team. And I know you guys move very quickly, but maybe you can tell the, people on this call, like some of your learnings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole process was a learning because it was our first time. So it was helpful to have Undivided walking us through it from beginning to end. But one of the key takeaways was the intake process, which is pretty much asking a lot of questions to this family about, their current situation when they came in, like all of the details that could lead to us understanding the complexity of the case, the level of risk for this family, the priority, because if we have multiple families going through this, then if we had to prioritize, that would help us understand the priority that we would give to families on, who shows up and when. Also, the crowd number, since this was our very first one, we were unsure on like, do we show up with 5 people or is it 15 or do we have one masses? We definitely want to prevent them from getting deported. So anything we had to do, we would probably work towards that. But understanding the level of risk that this family was facing based on their circumstances, that helped us determine how many people and how big the team had to be. We were grateful to partner with Crossroads. It happens to be that this family is both supported by Ola Immigrant Welcome Center and also by Crossroads. So we partner and locked arms in this effort, and we were able to identify the roles. So once we knew how many people we needed to be there and more of the logistics, the date and the time and all of that, we were able to figure out, we want from 5 to 7 people. Some of these need to be more on the logistics side. So Ola Immigrant Welcome Center took that role of doing the logistics and preparing and coordinating. Crossroads took more of the clergy portion. So if Victor was acting as clergy and the pastor of the family, and we appointed Walter as the spokesperson because he is an immigrant that has been able to establish himself here in US and now has become a US citizen and has done all of that successfully and now is serving the community. So a true awesome story. And we also had people from Crossroads showing up and helping and supporting.
Thank you. That sounds like an amazing journey in a short time. Again, like that was just amazing. And I was able to get on the call with you guys, and I just saw the whole process from afar and over Google, and it was quite amazing. Thank you for doing that. And Walter, the one question we got in the chat was about an attorney, and I'm just wondering, like, where is the family in terms of an attorney? Do they have one? Are you helping them?
Could you please repeat that? Just make sure or is it on the chat you said?
No. So, does the family have an attorney?
We are in the process of finding them one to make sure they take their case because, and I'm looking at also other questions similar to I'm trying to cover. When somebody has a case, it's not automatically assigned to their court for to decide whether they have an asylum case. So they have different check-ins, and then they would have prepared for the time when they're actually going to the immigration court. So most of the check-in that they go is just to check. But we're trying to connect them with one. They're actually interviewed with somebody in the past, and we have provided some level of support, but there isn't like somebody who is now we pair them with. They're still going to be connected with the one who
Got
has
it.
the case.
Got it. That's great. And that's also something important that the team can do, right? Is like looking for an attorney to connect the family. Victor, I was wondering, like, so, like I understand the process, right? Like you create a team, the family approved everything that you guys did. And from, even like approving to meet with me as a consultant to, like looking in for an attorney, like the family correct wasn't a part of the entire process, correct?
Yes, every single step. We did not do anything without asking the family if that's something that they wanted. In fact, one of the things that we talked about when they shared with us about their ICE appointment um, was that they were just a little bit nervous and that they would benefit or be blessed by us if some of us would go with them.
And so you guys went there with them, you met them there at the ICE check-in. You were I imagine you didn't go inside, is that correct? You didn't go in physically inside, but you guys waited outside, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. In fact,
And,
that our local offices have a very small parking. So we have, we kind of like took over the parking and they asked us to leave. And there's a little bit of tension in the air, of course. In fact, the security guard, because it wasn't even an officer, said, "Hey, actually, a pretty cool story, but let me kind of like go chronologically." So we went and he said, "Hey, you guys need to leave," and a big part of it was because the parking was full. And so we cleared the parking but we came back in and we stayed and we were kind of like removed from the main areas, and they knew and he knew we were praying for this family. Um, and one of the people in our group really spent the entire time talking with this security guard. And it was a beautiful experience because he was very honest. He shared how he's he doesn't want to see any of these people stay here. He wants to see them all go back. Yet we're there as witness of who they are as people and their character, in this case as members of our community, as followers of Christ. And also as that, we had the responsibility of modeling Christ's love to everybody. Doesn't matter who, including in this case the security guard. And so the person there in the group that was interacting with her, that didn't stop her from continuing to talk. In fact, very boldly, she invited him to church. We have something coming up very soon, because she wanted for him to know that, hey, we get it. You have your perspectives, we have a different one, but ultimately we can come under the banner of Christ. We can come together, and hopefully through that process, in our hearts being united.
that's really amazing. I didn't know that. I was learning that real time, guys.
Yeah.
And like it goes back to what Jasmine talked about earlier, right? Like we were breathing in and we said, I will love, and then we breathe out. And I will love my neighbor and enemy as myself. And that's what I feel like you guys were all doing there. Liza, we have like 1 minute. And I was wondering, like, can you talk about like, what are the next steps? What are you guys going to do now since you finished that one accompaniment?
Yeah, we fortunately had a photographer on site. So a lot of what we did was captured, and we will use that to just voice our experience and share with others what we've been through. Social media, talking about it with friends while we're doing live. And when they ask, how are you doing? We can just share what we're going through. Also, we want to find a place where they can share their experience with the congregation. So we still need to figure out how that will look like. But we want to make sure that we're advocating for them, but also sharing our experience so that other people can be aware of what's going on with the families that are going through all of what's happening in our nation.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like to me you guys are going to act as faithful witnesses and continue sharing what you saw. And by the way, the family's fine. They came in, they came out, and they're going to continue in the process, but everything turned out okay. Thank you guys again. I've told you this many times, so thank you for your leadership. Thank you for walking with the most vulnerable in your own community. And thank you to Kurt for joining us today and sharing your story of how you're taking action and acting as faithful witnesses. I'm going to turn it now to Stephanie, and she's going to walk us through teams. And we heard a little bit about teams, but now she's going to walk us through the practical of creating teams. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Raisa, Victor, and Walter. I actually appreciate the fact that I've been able to participate in some of those meetings with you all and to see the way you form this team and everything happens so quickly is absolutely amazing. Even the agenda that you put together for the day of the accompaniment was incredible. And like we just talked about, even listing ahead of time that you were going to pray for law enforcement when you got there is something that I think is a testament to the work of faith, the faith community in doing this. Hello, you all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephanie Kreider. I am the organizing director for Undivided, recently joined the team, started out as a participant a few years ago and went through our cohort experience, then became a trainer with Undivided and have been working in community in Michigan. I'm in West Bloomfield, Michigan, which is about 40 minutes from Detroit, and have been involved in advocacy work, I would say, for probably over 15 years. And my story is a little unique in that I've been in all these different spaces. You know, what does it look like to do this work in education and with the justice impacted community, with our immigrant and refugee families that came into our school community and just needed some guidance on how to get acclimated into the system. And so there are many ways that we are all showing up here today. None of us have to be experts to do the work. And that's kind of really what I want to stress to you, is that if you feel this burning desire and this passion to want to make a difference for the people in your community, you don't need to be an expert. Like, there's a ton of questions I see that's in the chat and it's ongoing. Continue to drop your questions there, but don't feel like because you don't have all the answers that you can't take that first step. And so I want to encourage you that, just like I did and so many other people who are part of the call today, just making a commitment to take that first step is all that is needed in order to start looking for your people and building a team. So you've heard a lot today. I mean, I don't know how many times we mentioned building a team, but we are going to stress this over and over and over, because we don't want you walking this journey alone. If you've been involved in this work for many, many years, you probably know, like I know, this can get exhausting really fast. And so there's power and there's something special about bringing together a group of people who can work alongside you. One of the things that I learned when I got involved with Undivided is that there are 3 areas that we focus on that tend to be those 3 areas that you want to think about at all times. That's healing, that's solidarity, that's justice. And I would tell you that what I remember telling Rich, that as I was observing him doing the planning and preparation with the Cincinnati team for the accompaniment, one of the things that I recognize is that there's so much healing that's needed, so much patience that's needed as you go about doing this planning and this work. And I had a conversation last week. We've been working with members of the Springfield, Ohio community as well. And I remember talking to Luann, and she was talking to me about her expertise in therapy and like, where does that fit? And I said, you know, it fits in a team with healing, because not only are we working with people with lived experiences that can be very traumatic, but as people in the faith community, as people in our greater community who are doing this work with us, this is also traumatic for us. And so there's a place for healing as we go about doing this work. And I would highly recommend that what Jasmine led us through today, that you find your version of doing something like a faith grounding, like a breathing exercise that you can bring to the team, because that's so important. Here's what I want you to know also, and you can pull up the slide deck here. When you are building team, representation matters. Representation matters because we want to make sure that we have a multiracial, multi-ethnic group that is representative of the issue and the people in whom we are serving, the people we are walking alongside of. And oftentimes what we experience is that there are people in various church communities, they're passionate about doing this work, they understand that there is a healing component, a spiritual component, but sometimes the group all looks the same. And so what's happening is that you're missing the voice. You're missing the stories. You're missing the lived experience that comes from people being a part of the journey. So just like how Walter was able to contribute in a way that others in maybe a Crossroads community couldn't do that, that's exactly why we want you to expand the people that you are walking alongside and doing that with. And if I'm honest with you, and this is what I tell people, I'm just going to keep it real with you all. Sometimes there's a loss of credibility when people don't see themselves represented on your team. Sometimes it's more of a hurdle to establish those relationships and sustain those relationships when you can't build the trust in the group because people feel like their voice doesn't matter because they don't see themselves represented. So there's an intentionality that is a part of doing this work. And so making sure that you have people represented. I saw something in the chat earlier too, where someone was asking about what happens when we're trying to do this work and you have people with special needs. I would say to you, know who your people are, know who your community is, like intentionally take note of that. So you can make sure that the voices that you are elevating and the people who are coming alongside you, a part of your team, will represent all of those needs and all of those concerns that need to be elevated. And I would say not only invite them to a meeting, not only invite them to the table, but make sure these voices are represented in your leadership structure. It matters when we are making decisions to make sure that maybe we have one thought in mind because that's a part of our personal story and our journey, but maybe there are other people at the table who see it very differently because there are nuances involved in this work. And I think part of the challenge is that people are looking for a cookie cutter approach, a template. And while we can have a framework, while we can have an agenda, there's so many nuances involved. And there's so much discernment that's involved in doing this work. And so we recommend that when you think about the leadership structure that you're having people there who are also a part of the decision-making process as you move through the work that you are taking on. When you form your team, you heard that Victor was a leader, Walter was a leader. There are a number of people who are in the leadership of the team. But what I would recommend is when you come together, talk about what your purpose is. Yeah, I remember reading Springfield's purpose and why they came together, and it was incredible. They had identified exactly who we are and why we're doing this work. Who's our audience? Who are our people? Why do we want to do this? And when you come together, you also want to figure out what are the norms in which you're going to agree to. What are the ways in which we want to honor each other and interact with each other? And what do we do maybe when there's conflict? And I would say to expect that, right? Expect that everyone won't agree and won't have the same ideas and won't have the same experience with the approach that you want. And you know what? That's okay. Because that's what makes us uniquely beautiful as people who come together to work on a team. And so talk about How do we resolve those differences that come up in the team so that we can continue moving forward and honor each other in the way that we do that? As you are building the norms and you have your structure in place, we want you to think about the trajectory that you're on, right? What does that look like? What is the rhythm of meeting when you're coming together? What's the frequency of that? Who else do we need to invite who's not at the table, because you're taking assessment along the way to make sure that everyone has a voice and that what their needs are is included in this process. And talking about roles is so important. I love the fact that this Cincinnati team talked about even who's doing what on the day of. Like, don't discount who's a part of your group and what they have to offer. I know in our group in Michigan, we talked a lot about the people who are better with like making sure we're doing that solidarity work and reaching out. And we've got a group of people who do that so well. They're always expanding our reach and talking about who we can include and how to invite. And then we have people who are focused on healing and what do we need in this moment? Maybe even calling together a Zoom meeting or a phone, creating a phone tree or whatever you need to do to make sure that someone is focusing on that healing aspect of it, and people who are actively talking through what the action plan is all the way down to the day of the session and who's doing what. So people usually ask us to, how do we build this team? Like, what does that look like? I don't even know how to get started. And so we believe in the power of one-to-ones. Those are one-to-one connections. Not going on social media per se, not necessarily texting and have ongoing conversations in that way, but really going back to the old school approach of building relationships and picking up the phone. Maybe that means you're meeting with people in person. Maybe that means that you're setting up in this virtual world a Zoom or a Google Meet session. And so you're talking to someone one-to-one. And in that session, what you're doing is you're coming into that space, being passionate about this work, coming into this space with a collaborative mindset and a mindset focused on justice and impact. And that's important because oftentimes we come into a space and we're kind of like, I know I want to do something good, but we want you to move from that space of like knowing intellectually what the issue is and what the data says, but we want you to move into a space where you're operating from your heart and showing your authentic self and your passion, but also moving into that gut experience. Because when you are moving from your gut, you feel compelled to say something, to do something, to make sure that justice is going to prevail, that you're making sure that impact is going to happen in the communities that you represent. And part of the way that you can do that is understanding your why. And Rich talked about that today. You dropped into the chat, why are you showing up today to be a part of training? Why are you showing up to do this work? And what we typically do in some of our trainings where we talk about the power of story, we talk about the power of having a 2 to 3 minute story prepared. And if you've heard any of us speak, we've talked about how we have a lot of different 2 to 3 minute versions of that story. And part of the reason is because you want it to be relevant and real time and impactful for the people in whom you're representing. And so I might have my education story that I share with people when I'm doing work in that space. I may have another story when I'm talking about criminal justice or when I'm talking to people in the special education community or people who are part of the ESL community. English is their second language, and we're doing work around that. And so start crafting a version of your story that you can use that will connect with people and resonate with them in a way that would be way more impactful than coming in with this generic phrase or terminology that you use. And let me also mention terminology here because it matters what we say. It matters how we phrase statements. And so know your audience. That means that if you're doing a one-on-one and you're listening to people and they're talking about what they're passionate about, they're talking about their values, take down in your notes, like some of the language that they're using, because you can begin to incorporate that into your conversation with people because that's what they need to hear. in order for it to click and for it to make sense. Like they get me and they understand. You're not posturing, you're not pretending, but you're just taking note and making sure that you're learning along this journey as you are going in front of people and bringing others along who are already doing the work with you. There is power behind people who have a following, people who have influence. And so you want to understand what their people are doing and what they're about and discern if this is a group that you want to bring into the space. But I want to give encouragement to the people here today, and you're like, I may not be a part of a congregation. I may not have a group of people who I'm already leading into the work. And so is there a place for me? And I would say to you that if you feel this nudging, if you feel that God is calling you to do this work, yes, you absolutely belong. Is there something that you can offer in the realm of healing? Is there something that you can offer in the realm of solidarity work and building those relationships? And what does it look like for you to do the justice work and creating this robust engagement that we'll have in our communities that will ultimately make the impact that we're seeking? I say, yes, you have a place in this work. And so even if you don't feel like you have a place of connection now, we want to make sure that you know that Undivided is here to walk alongside you. There are people who've dropped their information in the chat, and they may be in the area where you are. There are people there who can walk alongside you. And in the weeks and in the months ahead, we're going to be working as an Undivided staff team with our partners and figuring out a way that we can better partner and come alongside you. We have in some cities, we have local networks. In one rural area in Traverse City, we've got a local network that is formed there in Michigan. In Metro Detroit, we have a local network there. We're going to be embarking upon a leadership assembly, and it's something we're doing as a team to identify how we can better engage with our community and what those needs are. What are the training needs? What are the coaching needs? And what ways can we support people in identifying those issues that are important to them? And this is happening in other places around the country. And we want to lean into this work so that we can be a source of support for you all as we tackle this issue and many others. I want to talk for a minute around training and coaching and support. You've seen a link that was dropped into the chat that highlights our movement page. There'll be a QR code I'll show you in a moment. But we know that coming into this space, there is ongoing training that's needed. I'm still getting training myself. I'm still getting coached myself. That will never end for me, because there's always something new that I can learn to be able to articulate this work in a better way and be able to better connect with people and relate with people, because that matters. The way we interact with each other matters. The way we make each other feel as we're going through this journey matters. And so I'm always going to be a part of that training and coaching. And one of the things that we have that's going on as well, and we know there's a huge response to what we're calling our 2025 organizer development cohort. And so we're starting a waiting list for that. So if you're not signed up for our newsletter, we want you to make sure you sign up for that, because many of the trainings we will have coming up, the cohort experiences that we'll have coming up to help develop more leaders so that you don't feel like you can't do this alone. We will make sure we're communicating that with you as a potential next step for you to do this journey well. But here's what I want to say to you before we end out and we show this QR code for you to engage with us. I want to submit to you that one of the things that we learned in Michigan along this journey is that it's important to listen well. We did a listening campaign, and we wanted to first hear, what does the community need? Not what does our congregation think you need? Not what does Stephanie think you need as an activist? But we want to hear from the community exactly what it is that you need so that we can make sure that we're focusing our time and our resources on what's most important, right? Yes, we are all in this together. And one of the best ways to do this, to do this together, is to listen well. And so we started out with that campaign. And then what we did is last year, we went across Michigan and we did these training sessions where we not only talked about the power of story, but we talked about reflective listening. We talked about empathy. And Undivided has a care framework that really helps us to be able to lean into this work and do it in a way that is not demonizing, and to do it in a way that we can honor people who agree with us and people who may disagree with us. There is a way that we can do this together. And so one of the things I just want to tell you right now is that we heavily focus on listening well through listening for the emotion and that feeling that the person is sharing with you. That may be someone who is going through an experience where they have to go to court and they have to do a check-in. That may show up in the form of a family member who is concerned about someone being deported. That may show up by a member of clergy who feels like they want to meet the needs of their congregation, but doesn't quite know how to do that. That may be the person who works in the school community and they're worried about what will happen when they show up in that school building. How do I best support my students, right? All of us are in different places and we have these emotions and these feelings, and we're trying to wrestle with that the best way that we can. And sometimes we don't know how to do that. And sometimes we don't know how to articulate that well with other people. And so we talk about how do you hear and how do you validate those feelings and those emotions that people have, and not just focus on the thoughts and the words that are being expressed. And so that's something that we can talk about with Undivided in the trainings that we offer in order to listen to people well. And respond. One of the best ways you can respond is doing what we talked about, forming this team, making sure that you have representation, doing your one-to-ones. And you all, guess what? One-to-ones don't stop. When we do this work, we are always reaching out to new people, always hearing new stories, always finding ways to form collaborations and partner with people, because this work is so important and there's so much heavy lifting, and we don't want anybody to feel like they have to do it alone or that they're too exhausted to continue. And so we want to make sure that we're responding in ways that we can do this in a way that is very healing and very rewarding. And Natalie always reminds us on our staff is that we can do this with joy. And I know one of the ways for me of feeling that joy is when I'm in the midst of a team and my team can help lift me up in those moments when I'm feeling like, oh man, the weight of the world is on me. And then we do that for each other as we go through the journey, and then we can take that into our respective communities. So I want to show you, or I want to highlight the QR code that we have for you. I think I see questions in the chat asking about the newsletter and things like that. And there's a QR code that you can scan. So we have a new page on our Undivided website. And when you go down toward the bottom, you'll see a section that says resources and next steps. And in that section, you'll be able to click a button that will give you access to that resource guide that Rich talked about that can give you more information about doing this work. There's also an option that you can select to sign up for our newsletters. And that's one of the ways that you can hear more about our gatherings. And we do those faith grounding and breathing moments like you experienced with Jasmine today. We do that in that setting. We bring in speakers, who can share information, just like what you heard today from Rich and what you heard from Riza and Victor and Walter. And we have an opportunity to engage in small group settings where we can share what it is that we're feeling and we're thinking and how we want to respond as people in the community to respond to many of these crises around us. And there's a drop box there too. If you click on that drop box, you can select more than one way that you want to engage with us. And that'll give us an idea of how we can better prepare for the work that we have ahead as we partner with you and we partner with others who are going to take this Undivided journey with us. And the last thing that I want to mention here, if we can go to the slide that talks about our Undivided way. We posture ourselves in a particular way with Undivided. And this is what I want to leave you with before we pass it to Troy, our CEO, who's going to talk about a call to action and next steps. We posture ourselves in a way that we believe is approaching this with humility. We come with open hands. We come with humility so that we're open-handed to accept this wonderful call to do justice. I saw somebody mention Micah 6:8, and that is one of the scriptures that many of us hold on to as we do this work. There's a Building Bridges course that we've worked on, and in that we talk about the 2 greatest commandments, and that is love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And so there are things that we can hold on to that will help us accept that call to do justice. And we believe in linking arms. And that's one of the reasons why you hear us talking about forming a team over and over and over again. It is so important to link arms because we come as we are. And I want to say that again, we come as we are. No matter if you're struggling with even grasping this faith concept, no matter even if you're from a different denomination, theological perspective, we come as we are and we go forward together. And we have hopeful hearts as we do this work, because the only way that we can pursue this work and continue to fight it in every single day, justice and joy is what we believe is the combination that works. The only way we can do that is if we're anchored in hope. And we believe that in our hearts, if we seek the awe and the wonder of mutual flourishing that we know is possible, despite all the chaos around us, if we come in anchored in hope and seeking the awe and the wonder of mutual flourishing, we know that we can make an impact. We can make an impact in our local community, in our counties, in our state, and we've already begun the journey to even make an impact across the country. And so I hope you are believing with us that we can have open hands, we can link arms, and with hopeful hearts that we can make an impact. And we look forward to partnering with you in the future as we go about doing this work, particularly in the Undivided way. And I thank you all for joining us today. And Troy, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Troy's not on yet, but we are going to, Stephanie, can we go back and actually, can I share my screen? I want to share the website and what, like give them a visual, and you can walk us through again what you said in terms of where people can sign up.
Yes. So this is our movement page. And when you scroll down this page, it's going to give you a preview. We're just starting to talk about these local networks that we have. We also have one in Cincinnati. And so for those of you, I saw a ton of people on here who are a part of Cincinnati. You can get connected to that network. We have one that's going to be starting in Seattle. And then our context, where people come from different environments and have different needs. And we all know we have different capacities. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to lock arms and do this work together as a team. And as you go down, if you scroll a little bit further, as you go down, you see Organizing Undivided there. This is a new pathway for us in 2025. Some of you have heard about Living Undivided, Working Undivided, and now there's Organizing Undivided. And so we're going to be focusing on how do we build leaders across the country so that we can lean into the work that we believe we are called to do. This training for Faithful Witness is what you see there. You see that download for the resources. And then there's also contacting us for more information. That's where you're going to see that drop down that I mentioned before. I see that someone dropped our main website. I will just highlight here, it is undivided.us. And we are going through a transition too. So for those of you who are reaching out to us directly, you can reach out to us by our first name, last name at undivided.us.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I was wondering if you could give us like one other example. We saw this great example of the accompaniment team. I know I'm putting you on a spot. We're just trying to stretch this out a little bit.
That's okay.
The and so we saw this great example of an accompaniment team. Can you give us another example of a multiracial team, especially in your work in Michigan, and what they're doing and the power they're building?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a part of the team in Michigan for a few years now, working with Undivided. And like I said, I started out as a participant, just seeking more information about racial justice. And Kensington Church is my church home. And Becky Lee is one of the leaders who actually formed the partnership between Undivided and Kensington. And if you are a part of a faith community, I highly recommend you talk to your leadership about ways to partner with Undivided. Because what I didn't know, you all, is that in doing this work for so many years, I was like, I don't know if I want to even do this. I've told Rich and other people, I've shared my story. Like, I don't even know if I want to get involved in this because I have so much other stuff in this lane going on. But I almost missed my blessing. And this is something you guys are going to hear me saying over and over and over, because my life completely changed because of getting involved in Undivided. And so not only have I had the opportunity to work internally with doing the facilitation and doing the trainings, I've been able to partner with this community in Michigan. We have a multiracial team. And with our team, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that we were able to work across faith lines even. We created an interfaith team, and we even worked with people who feel like they have no faith at all, and they wanted to partner with us because they're like, listen, Undivided offers something that I haven't seen before. You got the awareness and the education, but what I really love is that you activate people into their agency and into their power. And so that has been an experience for me that I have absolutely loved.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm really happy you're on the team that you made that decision. Second time I've seen Stephanie train. Really short trainings. I can't wait to see you in really long trainings and just and all your learnings. I have so much to learn from you, and like you said, we always continue learning as organizers. I can't wait to learn from you. And thank you for stretching this out a little bit. We now have Troy on. And if we could put up his slide call to action, and take it away, Troy.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being on. I'm at a conference in Atlanta and had already been committed to lead a training with Dr. Hari Hahn that we just wrapped up. So it's great to be here. Just to set this up a little bit, as some of you know, I came to this work in part as a pastor and in part as a civil rights historian. And there's a couple things that the civil rights movement did that brought real change. One was that they stayed at it for a very long time. They stuck together and they stayed at it. A second is they built real teams. And with those teams, they began to move and take action. And third, they created moral dilemmas. And those moral dilemmas, you know them. The Montgomery bus boycott created a moral dilemma. The Birmingham campaign created a moral dilemma for the nation with the dogs and fire hoses being unleashed on school children, just calling for to be treated like a full human being. Certainly the Edmund Pettus Bridge and that horror of Bloody Sunday created a moral dilemma around voting rights. So part of what being a faithful witness does in these very challenging days is it creates a moral dilemma for our country. Will we stand with those and love those who are most vulnerable or not? And we want to invite you to do that. And I don't know if it's just me, but the screen share is a little slow. Is it coming through for others? Can somebody tell me? Is it just my computer that it's slow on?
Yeah, it's probably your computer. I can see it.
Okay, great. We just want to invite you. There's a QR code there for a couple things. One is, I think it's probably been mentioned, one thing we do monthly if you want to get involved in our community, and others say they can't see it either. So it's not just me. So something is going on there that maybe someone can fix, or maybe we can drop a link in the chat. There we go. I see it. Wonderful. So a few things. One is I just want to invite you to the gathering. Our next one is on Sunday, just a couple days away. This is a chance for us to get together, to pray, to worship, to engage, to listen and learn, and to be community together. We need to be in community. The path forward is not one of lone rangers or lone wolves. It's through community, and we need that together. If you hit the link, also that QR code, there are other places where you can get involved in us. We'd love to talk to you about bringing one of our cohorts. If you want to engage in some of this work about accompaniment and faithful witness, you can click on there, and we would love to follow up with you. Also, we're doing a lot of this work, and we want to provide even more support to places like Springfield, Ohio, and communities doing this work. So if you want to support our work of Undivided, small donors are really how we keep going. So we would invite you to hit that link as well. But the way I really want to close is to say I'm grateful for each and every one of you. We started with a verse from Acts 1:8, which is basically Jesus reminding his closest followers to be his witnesses, that they have been given power from the Holy Spirit to be his witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and in Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And again, the two things I think that really means is we embody and invite people to recognize who Jesus really is as a person of love and redemption and new life and resurrection, as the Son of God. And we also invite people to bear witness by loving who Jesus loved. Jesus loves everyone. Jesus loves those we disagree with politically, who voted different from us, who didn't vote at all. And Jesus, specifically in his public ministry, over and over again, reached out to those who were on the margins of society, the ones who were most afraid, most isolated, the woman at the well, the one suffering from leprosy, the Samaritan who actually reached out to someone beaten up by the side of the road. Jesus wants to include and be specifically present for those who are feeling alone and fearful and isolated. Let's show up for them and with them right now in this moment as Undivided in whatever community you happen to be a part of. God bless you, and thanks for being part of this.
Thank you, Troy.
I can close this in prayer if that's all right, Rich.
Absolutely. Let me just say goodbye to everyone, and then we'll close with prayer. But thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Jasmine. And thank you for joining us all today. Thank you also to the staff for holding us down in the, with the Zoom production. And also thank you to all the interpreters. Super important that we have space for everyone on these calls. Go ahead, Troy.
Yes, I'm just going to pray the Lord's Prayer. And so I invite you to pray along with me wherever you are. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Thanks, everyone.